There's a novel so disturbing readers call it psychologically damaging. At its center is a character so terrifying scholars can't agree what he is. Welcome. Today we're counting down the 20 weirdest facts about Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. We're talking about a judge who might not be human, scenes so graphic they shatter your perception of literature, a real historical gang whose true story is somehow darker than fiction. By the end, you'll see why Blood Meridian is the most terrifying novel ever written. Let's go. Fact 20. The judge's true origins. McCarthy's most iconic character, Judge Holden, is partially based on a real historical figure named John Judge Glanton. However, McCarthy transformed this figure into something far more mysterious and supernatural. The judge in the novel exhibits characteristics that suggest he may not be entirely human. He appears ageless, knowing languages and obscure historical events with impossible precision. McCarthy never explicitly confirms what the judge is, leaving readers to interpret whether he's a man, a demon, or something beyond human comprehension. This ambiguity has spawned countless academic theories and remains one of literature's great unsolved mysteries. The historical Glanton was brutal, but McCarthy's version transcends reality itself. What's truly unsettling is that McCarthy intentionally leaves this question unanswered. Throughout the novel, the judge performs actions that seem impossible for a human being. He's shown studying extinct species and ancient artifacts with knowledge that shouldn't exist. Some scholars argue the judge represents pure evil incarnate, while others suggest he's a manifestation of fate or destiny itself. The character becomes a mirror for readers' own interpretations, forcing us to confront what kind of evil we believe is possible in the world. Fact 19. The graphic scalping scenes. The novel contains some of the most disturbing descriptions of scalping violence ever committed to print. McCarthy doesn't shy away from anatomical detail when describing these acts. He describes the sound, the sight, and the sensations with unflinching precision. What makes this particularly disturbing is that scalping was a real historical practice, and McCarthy based many of his scenes on actual historical accounts. The visceral nature of these descriptions serves McCarthy's larger purpose, to strip away romanticism from the American frontier myth. He wanted readers to understand that westward expansion was built on unimaginable suffering. The violence isn't gratuitous in McCarthy's view, but rather historically honest and morally necessary to convey. These scenes aren't included for entertainment value. McCarthy's descriptions force readers to sit with the reality of historical violence rather than sanitize it. When you read these passages, you can't escape into comfortable distance. You're placed directly in the moment, experiencing the gore and the horror as vividly as possible. This technique fundamentally challenges the way we consume history. We're taught to discuss westward expansion as progress, as manifest destiny, as civilization, advancing into wilderness. McCarthy's novel demands we confront the human cost of that narrative. Fact 18. Cannibalism as a plot point. Among the many horrors the gang encounters, there is a cannibalistic incident involving desperate travelers. McCarthy describes this scene with the same matter-of-fact tone he uses for other atrocities. The scene is based on historical incidents, including the tragedy of the Donner Party. McCarthy includes it not for shock value, but to demonstrate how desperation strips humans of their civilized veneer. The characters in the novel barely react with moral outrage, treating it as another fact of frontier existence. This normalization of cannibalism is perhaps more disturbing than the act itself, suggesting a world where the usual moral codes have completely collapsed. What's particularly chilling is how the characters respond to this act. In most novels, cannibalism would be treated as a monumental moral catastrophe that everyone must reckon with. Instead, McCarthy's characters acknowledge it happens and move on. This casual indifference suggests that the frontier has produced a kind of moral numbness. The characters have witnessed so much horror that cannibalism barely registers as remarkable. It's this psychological detail that makes the scene truly haunting, not the act itself, but humanity's capacity to normalize the unthinkable. Fact 17. The real-life Glanton Gang. McCarthy's narrative follows a gang loosely based on the real Glanton Gang, which operated in the 1850s. However, McCarthy intensified and darkened their historical record. The real gang did engage in scalp hunting, mercenary work, and brutal killings. McCarthy researched extensively, consulting historical documents and journals. What's strange is that the historical reality was so extreme that McCarthy felt compelled to tone down certain elements for fiction, believing readers wouldn't find an unvarnished historical account believable. This inversion of artistic responsibility, where fiction must be less extreme than history, speaks to just how violent this period truly was. The actual Glanton Gang hunted Apaches for scalp bounties offered by Mexican governments. They operated in a moral void where profit justified any atrocity. McCarthy based his novel on this documented history, but realized that if he included every brutality, readers would reject the narrative as implausible. This creates a strange irony. The novel we read is actually toned down compared to what really happened. It means the actual historical record is more disturbing than one of literature's most disturbing novels. When you finish Blood Meridian, you might want to research the real Glanton Gang. Fair warning, history is darker than fiction. Fact 16. The E.O. Judge's encyclopedic knowledge. The judge possesses an almost supernatural breadth of knowledge. He speaks multiple languages, discusses advanced scientific concepts, quotes obscure texts, and demonstrates expertise in geology, paleontology, and countless other fields. McCarthy never explains how the judge acquired this knowledge. Some scenes suggest the judge has lived for centuries. Other moments hint at occult practices or demonic origins. This characterization reflects McCarthy's interest in the nature of knowledge itself and whether truly superior intelligence is even comprehensible to ordinary humans. The judge becomes a cipher for the ultimate authority figure, unknowable and potentially unreachable by conventional morality. The judge's knowledge seems infinite and impossible. He examines fossils with scientific precision while simultaneously performing rituals that suggest occult knowledge. He quotes philosophy and discusses mathematics with equal authority. This combination creates a character who seems to transcend normal human limitations. McCarthy is suggesting something profound here, that true knowledge and evil might be more closely connected than we'd like to believe. The judge uses his vast intelligence not to help humanity, but to advance his own mysterious agenda. He represents a kind of corrupted enlightenment, knowledge divorced from morality or compassion. Fact 15. The author's extreme research process. McCarthy spent years researching Blood Meridian, consulting historical archives, journals, and academic texts. He traveled to the actual locations where the Glanton Gang operated, walking the borderlands between Mexico and the American Southwest. McCarthy interviewed historians and collected primary source materials. What's remarkable is his commitment to historical authenticity, even for scenes of extreme violence. He wanted the novel to be grounded in real events, real geography, and real suffering. This meticulous research meant McCarthy was consciously choosing to depict violence that actually happened, making his artistic decisions even more deliberately confrontational. The novel isn't a product of imagination run wild, but rather controlled artistic choice based on historical evidence. McCarthy's research methodology was obsessive. He didn't just read about the frontier, he physically traveled it. He stood in the same deserts where the Glanton Gang operated. He studied the geology, the weather patterns, the vegetation. This attention to detail creates an authenticity that seeps into every page. When McCarthy describes a desert landscape, he's describing an actual place he visited. When he describes violence, he's basing it on documented historical accounts. This grounding in reality makes the novel impossible to dismiss as mere sensationalism. McCarthy earned the right to write violently by doing the work to understand what he was depicting. Fact 14. The absence of quotation marks McCarthy's unconventional. Formatting choices contribute to the novel's unsettling tone. He frequently omits quotation marks around dialogue, creating ambiguity about who is speaking and when. He also uses minimal punctuation and capitalization in places where standard grammar would demand them. These choices don't follow standard publishing conventions. Editors and publishers initially resisted these stylistic decisions. McCarthy fought to maintain them because they serve his artistic vision. The removal of quotation marks creates a dreamlike quality and blurs the boundaries between narrative and speech. This technique makes the violent scenes feel more immediate and less mediated by conventional storytelling devices. Without quotation marks, dialogue bleeds into narrative description. You can't always tell where one character's words end and another's begins. This creates a disorienting effect that mirrors the confusion and chaos of the frontier itself. McCarthy is rejecting the very tools that traditionally separate narrator from character, reality from dialogue. It's a formal choice that reinforces his thematic concerns. The novel's form, the way it's written, becomes inseparable from its content, what it's describing. This integration of form and content is what makes McCarthy's stylistic choices so effective and so controversial. Fact 13. The novel's influence on popular culture. Despite its extreme difficulty and disturbing content, Blood Meridian has become a canonical work that influences countless artists, writers, filmmakers, and musicians. Authors like Marilynne Robinson, David Foster Wallace, and contemporary writers cite McCarthy's influence. The novel is taught in universities worldwide. Its imagery appears in various artworks and cultural references. What's peculiar is that a novel about nihilism, meaninglessness, and the failure of moral systems has become a celebrated literary milestone. The book attracts a devoted following despite, or perhaps because of, its refusal to offer comfort or redemption. It challenges the very idea that literature should be uplifting or morally instructive. Blood Meridian has become required reading for serious writers. It's studied in classrooms alongside canonical works like Moby Dick and The Great Gatsby. This is remarkable because the novel offers nothing comforting. It doesn't tell readers that good triumphs or that suffering leads to growth. Yet it's become beloved precisely because it refuses these comforting lies. The novel has demonstrated that there's an audience hungry for unflinching artistic truth. In a culture that often rewards escapism and feel-good narratives, Blood Meridian's success proves that serious readers still want art that challenges and disturbs them. Fact 12. The symbolic significance of color. McCarthy uses color symbolism throughout the novel in unconventional ways. The color red appears constantly, representing blood, violence, and the landscape itself. However, McCarthy also describes sunsets, dawns, and natural phenomena in stunning, almost transcendent terms. This juxtaposition creates cognitive dissonance. The same world that contains incomprehensible beauty also contains incomprehensible cruelty. McCarthy refuses to separate aesthetics from violence or suggest that nature is innocent. The sky can be beautiful and terrible simultaneously. This approach challenges readers' expectations that beauty and goodness are connected, that the universe might be fundamentally indifferent to human concepts of morality. McCarthy's descriptions of natural beauty are almost unbearable precisely because they exist alongside descriptions of human brutality. A sunset isn't a moment of peace, it's a moment of terrible beauty that emphasizes human insignificance. The desert landscape is gorgeous and simultaneously hostile to human life. This refusal to let beauty provide moral comfort is central to McCarthy's vision. He's suggesting that the universe doesn't care about human suffering or human morality. Nature is indifferent, beauty is indifferent, and humans project meaning onto an uncaring cosmos. This philosophical perspective makes Blood Meridian more than just a violent novel. It's a meditation on human insignificance. Fact 11. The Judge's Final Appearance. The Judge's final scene in the novel is deliberately ambiguous and disturbing. McCarthy describes the Judge in what appears to be a post-apocalyptic or timeless setting. The Judge appears as both a grotesque figure and a representation of evil itself. His final monologue suggests that he is eternal and will always exist in human consciousness. The ambiguity about whether this scene is real, metaphorical, or something else entirely has spawned extensive literary criticism. McCarthy provides no clear answer, allowing the Judge to exist as an unsettling presence that transcends the novel's narrative boundaries. The final scene has haunted readers and scholars for decades. Is it happening in reality? Is it a hallucination? Is it metaphorical? McCarthy never clarifies. The Judge appears to be dancing, celebrating, seemingly triumphant, but we don't understand what he's achieved or why he's celebrating. This ambiguity is intentional. McCarthy wants the Judge to linger in readers' minds long after the novel ends. The Judge shouldn't be fully comprehensible or containable within the narrative. He should feel like a force that transcends the story itself, something that exists beyond the novel's pages. This makes the ending deeply unsettling in ways that conventional narrative closure never could. Fact 10. The complete absence of redemptive arc. Most literary works, even those depicting violence and darkness, offer some form of redemption or moral learning. The protagonist of Blood Meridian experiences no redemption. He survives the novel's horrors but remains unchanged and fundamentally hollow. He learns nothing. He grows no wiser. He experiences no epiphany that might suggest suffering leads to understanding. This refusal to provide a redemptive narrative is radical. McCarthy essentially rejects the entire Western literary tradition that suggests suffering leads to growth. The kid, McCarthy's protagonist, becomes a haunting emblem of wasted potential and the possibility that some experiences simply destroy without transforming. The kid's survival is almost cruel. He doesn't die, he just continues existing. But existence without growth, without meaning, without redemption, becomes its own kind of death. McCarthy refuses to give readers the satisfaction of narrative meaning. We want to believe that the protagonist's suffering teaches him something, changes him, makes him wiser. McCarthy denies us that comfort. The kid remains a blank slate, a cipher, unchanged by everything he witnesses. This rejection of redemption might be the novel's most philosophically radical choice. Fact 9. The historical accuracy of minor details. McCarthy's commitment to historical detail extends to minor elements that most readers never notice. He accurately describes the weapons used during the 1850s, the trade routes across the desert, the specific plants and animals of the region, and the geological formations. Historians have verified many of these details. What's fascinating is that this meticulous accuracy concerning minor elements makes the extreme violence feel more grounded and real. We trust McCarthy's depictions of landscape because his descriptions of plants and geology are accurate. This trust transfers to the violent scenes, making them feel inevitable rather than sensationalized. Fact 8. The novel's rejection of narrative closure. Many novels end with a sense of conclusion, even if that conclusion is dark. Blood Meridian refuses this closure. The novel ends without resolving central mysteries, without explaining the judge, without giving readers a sense of finality. The ending is intentionally anticlimactic. McCarthy seems to suggest that life doesn't provide neat narrative conclusions. The frontier doesn't end cleanly. The violence doesn't lead to anything. The moral questions raised by the novel remain unanswered. This refusal of closure is itself a philosophical statement about reality's nature. McCarthy is suggesting that our desire for narrative meaning is itself a kind of delusion, a way we impose meaning on an uncaring cosmos. The novel's incomplete ending mirrors life's fundamental incompleteness. Fact 7. The influence of Herman Melville. McCarthy has cited Herman Melville as a major literary influence on Blood Meridian. Like Melville's Moby Dick, McCarthy's novel features an epic narrative scope and explores the existence of evil forces that may be beyond human morality. Both works feature charismatic figures whose nature is ambiguous and potentially supernatural. Both novels have been interpreted as meditations on the American frontier and American identity. McCarthy's Judge bears some resemblance to Melville's White Whale, a force of nature that is simultaneously beautiful and destructive. This literary genealogy connects McCarthy to the 19th century American tradition while pushing it toward more extreme conclusions. Fact 6. The novel's lack of clear ideology. Blood Meridian doesn't advocate for any particular political ideology. It's not anti-capitalist or anti-imperial in a conventional sense. It's not a simple critique of American imperialism, though anti-imperial themes are present. The novel refuses to suggest that any particular political system or moral framework would solve the problems it depicts. This refusal to adopt a clear ideological stance frustrated some readers and critics who wanted the novel to make a simple political argument. McCarthy seems to suggest that the violence and exploitation depicted in the novel reflect deeper truths about human nature that transcend any particular historical moment or political system. Fact 5. The religious imagery and ambiguity. Despite its extreme violence and apparent nihilism, Blood Meridian contains rich religious imagery. McCarthy references biblical events, describes landscapes in apocalyptic terms, and presents the judge as a figure that might represent various theological concepts. However, these religious references don't lead to any clear religious meaning. The novel doesn't advocate for faith or suggest that religion provides answers. Instead, religious imagery appears alongside everything else in a world where traditional sources of meaning have collapsed. This ambiguity frustrates readers seeking moral or spiritual guidance. McCarthy seems to suggest that even traditional religious frameworks cannot contain the novel's vision of human nature and historical violence. Fact 4. The philosophical depth of the dialogue. Some of the most challenging passages in Blood Meridian appear in dialogue scenes, particularly in conversations between the kid and other characters, especially an older guide figure. These conversations touch on deep philosophical questions about knowledge, morality, existence, and meaning. McCarthy's characters debate fundamental philosophical questions while sitting around campfires in the desert. These philosophical passages are difficult and demand careful reading. They're not presented with explanations or resolutions. Instead, McCarthy leaves readers to wrestle with these questions themselves. The novel becomes a kind of philosophical text masquerading as a historical narrative. Fact 3. The novel's relationship with the Western genre. Blood Meridian subverts the Western genre by refusing to celebrate frontier heroism or suggest that westward expansion was justified. Traditional Westerns present the frontier as a space of freedom and opportunity. McCarthy's novel reveals the frontier as a space of violence, exploitation, and meaninglessness. He uses the Western's conventions while emptying them of their traditional significance. Characters who might be heroes in a traditional Western become figures of moral horror in McCarthy's vision. This subversion is radical because it attacks the mythological foundations of American identity. McCarthy demonstrates how the Western genre itself was complicit in romanticizing violence and exploitation. Fact 2. The novel's influence on Cormac McCarthy's own career. McCarthy wrote Blood Meridian when few people read it. He didn't write it for commercial success or critical acclaim. He wrote it because he needed to write it, because the story demanded telling in this unflinching way. The decades-long wait for recognition must have been difficult, but it also gave McCarthy freedom. He wasn't writing for an audience, he was writing for artistic truth. When Blood Meridian finally achieved canonical status, it vindicated McCarthy's belief that uncompromising art could eventually find its audience. This has implications for contemporary writers. McCarthy's career suggests that sometimes the most challenging work takes longest to be understood, but its power ultimately transcends initial indifference. Fact 1. The human capacity for horror. Ultimately, the weirdest fact about Blood Meridian is what it reveals about human capacity for violence, cruelty, and indifference. McCarthy bases the novel on actual historical events. Real people committed these atrocities. Real people witnessed them. Real people normalized them. The novel becomes strange not because of McCarthy's imagination, but because history itself was this strange. McCarthy's artistic achievement lies in making readers confront this reality without the usual cushioning of narrative meaning or moral lesson. The novel suggests that humans are capable of extraordinary evil, and that evil doesn't require explanation or justification within a coherent moral framework. This uncomfortable truth is perhaps the novel's most disturbing and important fact. Closing remarks. Blood Meridian remains one of literature's most challenging and significant works. It offers no easy answers and provides no comfort. The novel forces readers to confront difficult truths about human nature, history, and morality. Whether you find it brilliant or unbearable, the novel's refusal to compromise its vision stands as a remarkable achievement in American literature. It's a novel that demands something from its readers, not entertainment, but engagement with some of the darkest questions humanity must face.